So I'm going to be doing a series. We're going to go through, it's probably going to take a couple years, the Mishneh Torah. So this is the RAMBAM's Mishneh Torah. Moses Maimonides. He wrote the only complete codification of Jewish law. It's written with the perspective as if the temple was standing, or that we should be practicing Judaism with that perspective. He did live in a time when there wasn't a temple. I believe he lived at the end of the 1100s, I think he died at the beginning of the 1200s. So this is like 8 centuries old, but it's unprecedented in Jewish history. So basically, the hierarchy of literature in Judaism is that you have the written Torah, you have the Mishnah, which is the legal case law, that's basically representative of the oral Torah. After that, you have various supplements to that, like the Tosefta, and you have the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. So those are basically case law, and it can be very difficult to figure out what is the actual law that you're supposed to follow, because kind of like the train of thought in these works is basically that you have a lot of guys that are debating different topics from different time periods even, and you have a hard time kind of determining, okay, so this guy said this, that's a good argument, but then somebody shatters that argument with another line of thought, and it's really difficult to understand, like, what should you do. So his intention was, because there was a lot of lack of Torah knowledge in the world, and there weren't many people who had the ability to understand the entire oral Torah, he set out to clarify what the halacha is. So that's what the Mishneh Torah is. It's divided into 14 volumes. So in Hebrew, Yod Dalet is 14, so it spells Yod. So it's also called Yad Hazakah, the strong hand. So basically, the only other types of Jewish codifications in Jewish law you have, before him you had the Gronek Teshuvot, you have various other, the Rif, Hananiah ben Hushiel, there's the Rosh, very popular. But basically, after these other codifiers, they basically are giving you Judaism in terms of like customs of what groups do in their area, but like the Shulchan Aruch or the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch or the Shulchan Aruch Harav, these are all, they're all claimed to be like codifications of Jewish law, but they're not entire, complete codifications of Jewish law. People practice this stuff today in those books, but ultimately they do tell you to do some things that are not the full intention of Judaism, like as if the temple was standing and whatnot. And there's some other things that are involved in some of that stuff, and it's not really the place to go into all that. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the preface, so you get an understanding of his perspective, why he wrote this, and then I'll be dividing this up and having different videos for different sections, maybe various chapters and onwards. So this particular edition is put out by the 770, like the Chabad group. Has the Lubavitcher Rebbe's commentary. I'm not really going to go over his commentary unless it's like really important, but you could also follow along the text at Sefaria, which I'll put a link in the description. You can go to Sefaria and read along. So he starts out, his preface is, in the name of Hashem, God of the universe, then I shall not be ashamed when I gaze upon all your mitzvot. All the mitzvot which were given to Moshe at Sinai were given with their explanation as it states, and I shall give you the stone tablets and the Torah and mitzvot. The Torah refers to the written Torah, and the mitzvah refers to its explanation. He commanded us to fulfill the Torah in accordance with the mitzvah, and it is this mitzvah which is called the oral Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh. The entire Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu before he died in his own handwriting. He gave a Sefer Torah to each and every tribe, and he placed one Sefer in the Aron as a testimony, as it states, take this Sefer Torah and place it on the side of the Ark of the Covenant of Hashem your God, and it shall be there among you as a testimony. The mitzvah, which is the explanation of the Torah, he did not write. Rather, he commanded it to the elders and to Yehoshua and all of Israel, as it states, the entire thing which I command you, you shall observe to fulfill. Observe it to fulfill. It is therefore called the oral Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh. Although the oral Torah was not written, Moshe Rabbeinu taught it in its entirety in his court to the 70 elders, and to Eleazar, Pinchas, Yehoshua, the three of whom received it directly from Moshe. To Yehoshua, who was Moshe Rabbeinu's student, he transmitted the oral Torah and commanded him regarding it, and so too Yehoshua, for all his life, taught orally. Many elders received from Yehoshua, so the Zekanim. And Eli received from the elders, from the Zekanim, and from Pinchas. Shemuel received from Eli in his court, and David received from Shemuel in his court. Achiah of Shiloh, who was among those who participated in the exodus from Egypt, was a Levi and heard from Moshe himself. Was young during Moshe's time. He received from David in his court. So Eliyahu received from Achiah Hashiloni in his court, and Elisha received from Eliyahu in his court, and Yehoyada HaKohen received from Elisha in his court, and Zechariah received from Yehoyada in his court, and Hosea received from Zechariah in his court, and Amos received from Hosea in his court, and Yeshaiah received from Amos in his court, and Micha received from Yeshaiah in his court, and Joel received from Micha in his court, and Nahum received from Joel in his court, and Habakkuk received from Nahum in his court, and Zephaniah received from Habakkuk in his court, and Yirmiah received from Zephaniah in his court, and Baruch ben Neriah received from Yirmiah in his court, and Ezra in his court received from Baruch ben Neriah in his court. So Ezra's court are those called the men of the great assembly. They are Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Nehemiah ben Chachaliah, Mordecai, Bilshan, and Zerubbabel, and many sages with them, a total of 120 Zekanim, 120 elders. The last of them was Shimon HaTzadik. He was among the 120 and received the oral Torah from them all, and he was Kohen Gadol following Ezra. And Tyrannus of Socho in his court received from Shimon HaTzadik in his court. Yosef ben Yoezer of Zereda and Yosef ben Yochanan of Yerushalayim in their court received from Antigonus in his court. Yehoshua ben Parachia and Nittai of Arbel in their court received from Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan in their court. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach in their court received from Yehoshua ben Parachia and Nittai of Arbel in their court. Shemaiah and Avtalion, the righteous converts in their court, received from Yehuda and Shimon in their court. Hillel and Shammai in their court received from Shemaiah and Avtalion in their court. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Shimon, son of Hillel, received from Hillel the elder in his court. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students, and they were the great sages who received from him. They are Rabbi Eliezer the Great, Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Yoshi HaKohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nathaniel, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef received from Rabbi Eliezer the Great. His father Yosef was a righteous convert. Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Meir, son of the righteous convert, received from Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Meir and his colleagues also received from Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Meir's colleagues were Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, Rabbi Yochanan Hasandler, Shimon ben Azai, and Rabbi Hananiah ben Tardion. Rabbi Akiva's colleagues also received from Rabbi Eliezer the Great. Rabbi Akiva's colleagues were Rabbi Tarfon, teacher of Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So a lot of these names you'll find in Perkei Avot. Rabban Gamliel the elder received from his father, Rabban Shimon, son of Hillel the elder, and his son, Rabban Shimon, received from him. Rabbi Yehuda, son of this Rabban Shimon, is called Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our holy master, and he received from his father and from Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua and his colleague Rabbi Shimon. Rabbeinu HaKadosh composed the Mishnah. From the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabbeinu HaKadosh, no work was composed from which the oral Torah would be taught publicly. Rather, in each generation, the head of the court or the prophet of that generation would inscribe for himself notations of the transmitted teachings he heard from his masters, and he would teach them orally in public. So, again, Rabbeinu HaKadosh wrote the Mishnah, and so too each person would write on his own, according to his ability, the explanations of the Torah and its laws as he heard them, as well as the novel teachings which were expounded in each generation. So those which were not learned from tradition, but rather expounded through one of the 13 rules by which the Torah is elucidated, expounded upon, and to which the high court agreed. So things always were until Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He gathered all the transmitted teachings, all the laws, clarifications, and explanations that were heard from Moshe Rabbeinu, and which the court in each generation had learned in the entire Torah, and he composed all these. The book of the Mishnah. He taught it well to the sages in public before the entire Jewish nation, and wrote it all down and spread it to all places, so that the oral Torah would not be forgotten from Israel. So it's important. He's trying to tell you that it's in public. It's not some secret thing that, like, all of a sudden somebody just comes up with a book and is like, look what I got here. This was all this is all open stuff. Again, this is like court case adjudications, case law, that type of stuff, like clarifications on law from, basically this is like higher court stuff. We have a Supreme Court. Each state has a Supreme Court. There are lower courts, and that's the way that the system operated. And things would work their way up into the courts until it got to the highest court. And in this case, what happened was that this stuff gets recorded, and basically what he did was he wrote this down. Why did Rabbeinu HaKadosh do so and not leave things as they were? It was because he saw the number of students decline steadily. So the Romans were killing people. There was a lot of stuff that you couldn't do. They tried to suppress religion altogether. Can't wear tefillin. You can't give someone smicha to become a rabbi. And it was because he saw the number of students declining steadily, and new troubles appearing and arriving, and the evil empire spreading in the world and gaining strength, and the Jewish people being scattered and moving off to the far edges of civilization. So he composed a single work to be in the hands of all, so that they learn it quickly and it not be forgotten. And he sat all his days, and he and his court, and taught Mishnah publicly. So there was actually a couple times in Jewish history where the transmission of oral Torah bottlenecked, and one of those times is actually Hillel. Hillel came and he actually revived Torah learning in the land of Israel. So that's why his name is actually very great, and that's probably one of the reasons why contributes, obviously, the reasons why we follow Hillel and not Shammai. Even though Shammai, he was a little younger, and he was also a colleague of his, there are significant disputes amongst the two legal philosophies of both groups. And I think that also led to various factions later on in the days of when the temple was destroyed. You have a lot of people like the Zealots. You had people that separated off into the wilderness like the Essenes. You had fanatics like the Pharisees. Just the general term rabbis or rabbinic people that we talk about here, they're not Pharisees. Pharisees, not all of them. Pharisees were actually a kind of like a radical group within Judaism. They would do crazy stuff, and there's stuff that it talks about in the Talmud where they're so absent-minded that they'd run into a wall. That they're so like, I guess the term is too spiritually elevated that they're no good in real life. But it's not entirely true. But there's fun poked at them in the Talmud about some of the things that they did, and they weren't looked at as great. So just because people throw around the term Pharisees and Christianity talks about Pharisees and stuff like that, that actually wasn't a normal group of rabbis. I think if you're looking at Christianity's perspective in the terms that they use, whenever it talks about scribes, that's more the rabbinic class that we're talking about here. All right. So he taught it publicly. These are the great sages who were members of Rabbeinu HaKadosh's court and who received from him his sons Shimon and Gamliel, Rabbi Aphas, Rabbi Hanina Bar Chama, Rabbi Chia, Rav, Rabbi Yanai, Bar Kapara, Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Hoshaya. These were the great sages who received from him, along with thousands and myriads of other sages. Although these 11 received from Rabbeinu HaKadosh and stood in his study hall, Rabbi Yochanan was young and was later a student of Rabbi Yanai and received Torah from him. So too Rav received from Rabbi Yanai, and Shmuel received from Rabbi Hanina Bar Chama. So Rav composed Sifra and Sifrei to clarify and inform the basics of the Mishnah, and Rabbi Chia composed Tosefta to clarify matters of the Mishnah. So the Tosefta means like a supplement. So it actually reads just like the Mishnah, where you have this rabbi says this and this one says this, and it's back and forth. But they're actually conversations or debates that didn't get recorded in the Mishnah. So it's actually very interesting to see some of this stuff, because they say that there's, like, if you're looking in the Talmud, whenever it brings up a statement by some rabbi, and they're like, where did they pull that from? It's kind of like there's no context to it. But if you actually dig into the Tosefta, you see the context to that. So there's all this stuff that's just Judaism loves books. Let's see. And Jews love books. We all love books, huh? So Rav composed Sifra and Sifrei to clarify and inform the basics of the Mishnah, and Rabbi Chia composed Tosefta to clarify matters of the Mishnah. So too Rabbi Hoshaya and Bar Kapara composed Baraitot to clarify the words of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Yochanan composed the Talmud Yerushalmi in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, about 300 years after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So the Babylonian Talmud was written in the land of Israel about 300 years after the destruction of the temple. The great sages who received from Rav and Shmuel included Rav Huna, Rav Yehuda, Rav Nachman, and Rav Kahana. And the great sages who received from Rabbi Yochanan included Rabbi Bar Chana. So Rabbi Bar Chana in the Talmud, he actually provides some stories, and they're actually very mystical, symbolic stories, and they're actually interesting to penetrate. And as a matter of fact, if I get the chance, I'll just shout it out. There's a book by Rav Kook. Well, it's a translation of Rav Kook's book, where he goes over, I think it's like 300-400 pages long. He goes over these stories of Rabbi Bar Chana, and they're very interesting. Okay, so, and the great sages who received from Rabbi Yochanan included Rabbi Bar Chana, Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi, Rav Dimi, and Rabbi Avun. Among the sages who received from Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda were Rabbah and Rav Yosef. And among the sages who received from Rabbah and Rav Yosef were Abaye and Rava, who both also received from Rav Nachman. Among the sages who received from Rava were Rav Ashe and Ravina. Mar bar Rav Ashe received from his father Rav Ashe and from Ravina. Okay, a little confusing there. Guys have the same names. It follows that from Rav Ashi until Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom, there were 40 generations as follows. So now he's going to go backwards. This is so important. This lineage of Torah transmission is so important. He told us one direction. Now he's going to go backwards. So it follows that from Rav Ashi until Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom, there were 40 generations as follows. 1, and he's going to count this out. Rav Ashi from Rava. 2, Rava from Rabba. 3, Rabba from Rav Huna. 4, Rav Huna from Rabbi Yochanan, Rav and Shmuel. 5, Rabbi Yochanan, Rav and Shmuel from Rabbeinu HaKadosh. 6, Rabbeinu HaKadosh from his father, Rabbi Shimon. 7, Rabbi Shimon from his father, Rabban Gamliel. 8, Rabban Gamliel from his father, Rabban Shimon. 9, Rabban Shimon from his father, Rabban Gamliel the elder. 10, his father, Rabban Gamliel the elder, from his own father, Rabban Shimon. 11, Rabban Shimon from his father, Hillel, and from Shammai. 12, Hillel and Shammai from Shemaiah and Avtalion. 13, Shemaiah and Avtalion from Yehuda and Shimon. 14, Yehuda and Shimon from Yehoshua ben Parachi and Nittai of Arbel. 15, Yehoshua and Nittai from Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan. 16, Yosef ben Yoezer and Yosef ben Yochanan from Antignos. 17, Antignos from Shimon HaTzadik. 18, Shimon HaTzadik from Ezra. 19, Ezra from Baruch. 20, Baruch from Yirmiah. 21, Yirmiah from Zephaniah. 22, Zephaniah from Habakkuk. 23, Habakkuk from Nahum. 24, Nahum from Yoel. 25, Yoel from Micha. 26, Micha from Yeshaya. 27, Yeshaya from Amos. 28, Amos from Hosea. 29, Hosea from Zechariah. 30, Zechariah from Yehoiada. 31, Yehoiada from Elisha. 32, Elisha from Eliyahu. So 33, Eliyahu from Achiah. 34, Achiah from David, so David. 35, David from Shmuel. 36, Shmuel from Eli. 37, Eli from Pinchas. Pinchas from Yehoshua. And Yehoshua, 39, Yehoshua from Moshe Rabbeinu. So 40, Moshe Rabbeinu from the Almighty. And so we find that they all received from Hashem, the God of Israel. Okay. So all these aforementioned sages were the greatest of their generations. Some were heads of yeshivot, some were exilarchs, some were members of the great Sanhedrin. Along with them in every generation were thousands of myriads who heard from them and with them. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the last of the Talmudic sages. Rav Ashi composed the Talmud Bavli in the land of Sumer, that's Babylonia, and some 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan composed the Talmud Yerushalmi. The purpose of the two Talmuds is to explain the words of the Mishnah and clarify its depths and those novel teachings which were expounded in each and every court from the days of Rabbeinu HaKadosh until the composition of the Talmud. Both Talmuds, as well as the Tosefta, Sifrei, and the Toseftot, all clarify the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, the liable and the exempt, the kosher and the unfit, just as was copied from person to person from the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu from Hashem at Mount Sinai. They also clarify matters which were decreed by the sages and the prophets in each generation in order to set a protective fence for the Torah, as they had heard specifically from Moshe, as it states, "And you shall safeguard my charge, set safeguards for my charge." They also clarify the customs and ordinances which were ordained or became customary in each generation, as the court of that generation saw fit. So for it is forbidden to deviate from them. As it states, you shall not deviate from that which they tell you to the right or to the left. And that's where a lot of people go astray, is because they actually try to deviate from what the judges had set out. So it's like the idea the Karaites, like the Karaites have no structure to their belief system. So like when we have to rebuild the temple and reestablish that entire service, how does a Karaite know, like, for real, like what to do with the sacrifice, where to put it, how to cut it up. There's no instruction for that. As a matter of fact, there's a section in the Talmud that talks about this stuff entirely, specifically. It's very detailed. So some of that stuff, like a Karaite they don't have the information to reestablish that sacrificial system. There's no, how do you adjudicate that stuff? You have to have rules, and that's the thing. You go to the right or the left, right? Whether it's that, you go Reform. You have to have some sort of connection to that tradition. And I'll mention one thing. So the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, they do not cover the same material entirely. So the Jerusalem Talmud covers less sections of the Mishnah, and the Babylonian Talmud covers more. But neither one of them cover the entire Mishnah. So there are some things in the Mishnah that are undisputed, so there was no halakhic debate over, and a lot of those things involved stuff that actually was was obviously very ancient, like the sacrifices and things like that. That's why whenever we say our prayers in the morning for Shacharit, there's you study Torah, and the halacha is that you don't study Torah. You don't, before you pray, don't study Torah that has a lot of debate in it, because then your mind will be on the debate that you just were studying and not on your prayers, because your prayers are supposed to have the proper intention. So you're actually halakhically prohibited from studying debate like Torah before you pray. So those sections that we read are like the Ketoret, the incense, right? And the so specifically the thing that doesn't have any Talmud on it, Talmud sections written on it, Babylonian or Jerusalem, is the offerings. So there's a whole section there where it's talks about the offerings and the details of some of that stuff. Not all the details, just a few paragraphs for each type of offering. But that's the kind of stuff that it's there. So some of that stuff is non-disputed. There was no debate. There was no argument. It was known for a very long time. So not everything in the Mishnah corresponds to something in the Talmud. Okay. And also the wondrous laws and statutes which they did not receive from Moshe. So, sorry, you should not deviate from that which they tell you to the right or to the left. And also the wondrous laws and statutes which they did not receive from Moshe, which the court of that generation deduced through rules of Torah exegesis, and was established by those elders, who concluded that such is the law. Rav Ashi compiled all this in the Talmud from the time of Moshe until his time. The sages of the Mishnah composed additional works to explain the Torah's words. Rabbi Hoshaya, a student of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, composed a work explaining the book of Bereshit. Rabbi Yishmael explained from Shemot until the end of the Torah, and this is called Mechilta. Rabbi Akiva also composed Mechilta. Other sages following them composed Midrashot. All of these were composed before the Talmud Bavli, Babylonian Talmud. It follows that Ravina and Rav Ashi and their colleagues were the last of the great sages of Israel who transmitted the old Torah and who issued decrees, established ordinances and customs, in which their decrees, ordinances, and customs spread among all the Jewish people in all places they settled. So, following the court of Rav Ashi, who composed the Talmud, in his son's days and completed it, the Jewish people were dispersed throughout all the lands in an extensive diaspora, reaching the edges in far-off isles. Strife increased throughout the world, and the roads became distorted by roving armies, and the study of Torah diminished, and the Jewish people no longer gathered to study in their yeshivot by the thousands and myriads as before. So rather, the remaining individuals gather, those that Hashem calls upon them in each city and country, and involve themselves in Torah and understand the works of all the sages, and know from them what is the way of the law. The courts established after the Talmud in any country that decreed or ordained or established a practice for the people of its country or for the people of many countries, its actions did not spread among all Israel. due to the distance between their places of settlement and the defective roads, and since the court of that country had the status of individuals, that's very important. The courts of that country had the status of individuals, while the high court of 71 judges had ceased to exist years before the composition of the Talmud. Okay, so therefore, people of one country are not compelled to follow the accepted practices of another country. We do not tell one court to decree that which another court decreed in its country. So too, if one of the great sages taught that the way of law is such, and a later court clarified that this is not the way of law, as recorded in the Talmud, we do not heed the first, but rather heed he whose words reason inclines, whether first or last. So that's extremely important, and that's actually this principle is the principle that Rabbi David Bar Chaim in Israel, he has the Machon Shiloh organization. He's Ashkenazi. His parents are Polish. He speaks his understanding of the most correct form of Hebrew, which is not Sephardic, modern, Ashkenazi, Temeni. I think it's close to Temeni, but so he he pushes this idea, and he has a Siddur that actually reflects updates to our place in history. Like, you know, we talk about like in Birkat HaMazon, we talk about we pray for the rebuilding of Jerusalem. We prayed in our normal tefillah, the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and he says, well, you know, like Jerusalem is actually rebuilt. There's people there. There's people living there now. We have all kinds of things there. The only thing we're missing is the temple. So he has a modification to those prayers, which is actually, it's not halakhically unacceptable, as we'll see later in the Mishneh Torah, where the RAMBAM talks about what you say during the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, the 18, which became 19 blessings. So the first three are important, the last three are important, but the prayers that you say in between are actually stuff that you can be a little bit more fluid and personal with. So that's where the blessing for the rebuilding of Jerusalem is in. It's in those middle blessings, and you know, those are things. So he feels that you don't have to, like if he grew up Ashkenazi, he doesn't feel that he sees that he doesn't have to accept those ideas like kitniot on Pesach, you know, not eating your rice and beans and stuff like that. So he feels that all people don't have to do that, because there's reasons why they set those standards, but some of this stuff doesn't apply today. Some of the stuff might still apply today, but you have to use your own reason to do it, because, you know, ultimately rice and beans are not prohibited on Pesach. So that's a custom that was instituted by the law of that land. So that's actually something he became controversial over, but he is a very big name, and he's got a very big brain on his shoulders, and he has an encyclopedia of knowledge. Anyway, to move on, the above applies to laws, decrees, ordinances, and customs. So we do not heed the first, but rather heed he whose words reason inclines, whether first or last, right? Because as I'm going back here, because the people of one country are not compelled to follow the accepted practices of another country. We do not tell one court to decree that which another court decreed in its country. Okay, so he's saying the above applies to laws, decrees, ordinances, and customs which originated after the conclusion of the Talmud. However, anything that is in the Talmud Bavli is incumbent upon the entire Jewish people to follow. And we compel every city and country to follow all the customs followed by the sages of the Talmud, to decree their decrees and to follow their ordinances. And this is not just everything that's in the Talmud, because the Talmud actually covers case law, and there's stuff in there that they talk about that's actually not, like, not just because it's in there doesn't mean you do it. You know, just like you have case law in the United States, just because we have a law that talks about manslaughter doesn't mean you go out and slaughter somebody. But so again, there were principles determine who won those arguments in the Talmud. And basically what he's saying is, I'm going to present this to you. So that's what he's saying by, you have to follow what's in the Talmud. Okay. Since all those things contained in the Talmud were accepted by the entire Jewish people, so at that time there was unity in the world, and those, at least unity in terms of they could communicate with each other and they could still travel freely, before some of the communications and travel got shut down. Okay, and those sages who ordained or decreed or established accepted practices or established by exegesis and concluded that the law is such were all the sages of Israel or the majority thereof. And it was they who heard the tradition, the basic tenets in the entire Torah generation after generation up until Moshe Rabbeinu, alav shalom. All the sages who arose after the composition of the Talmud and expounded upon it and became famous for their wisdom, they are called Geonim. And all those Geonim who arose in Eretz Yisrael in the land of Sumer, which is Babylon, and in Spain and France, studied the method of the Talmud and revealed its hidden secrets and clarified its matters, for its method is exceedingly deep. Therefore, that's actually a very heavy statement there. For its method is exceedingly deep. It's actually really, it takes a lot of concentration and understanding to go through that stuff. Furthermore, it is in the Aramaic language mixed with other languages. So it's in Aramaic, but there's like Persian words in there, and there's Greek words in there, and probably other stuff. So you have to be fluent in a whole bunch of different languages to fully understand it, right? I mean, even in Judaism today, we've got a lot of works in English. We've got Hebrew. There's Yiddish. If you go back further, there's Nonic, Aramaic, Arabic. Some of these guys might have wrote in like Latin, maybe even the language of their area, maybe Spanish, French, something like that. I mean, Persian, just so many different things. Like the Mishneh Torah here was not written in Hebrew; it was written in Arabic. So, back in their day, they still had to deal with multiple languages. And if you think at that time, we might think that like Aramaic's an antiquated language, but if you go back 2,000 years, they were dealing in languages that were also antiquated from their time. So you really had to be a real scholar to be able to get into this stuff. We have a lot of help today because we have a lot of books that are translated into English, and we have a lot of commentaries and everything else. But still, it's difficult. So it is in the Aramaic language mixed with other languages, for that vernacular was clear to all in Sumer at the time. The Talmud was composed, but in other places and in Sumer too, in the time of the Geonim, no person is familiar with that language until he is taught, right? Because now it's an antiquated language, so nobody's speaking it, so you can't learn it. You have to be taught it. So it makes it even harder. That's what he's saying. So today, in his day, it's even harder than it was to penetrate those texts, right? So many questions were posed by the people of each city to the Gaon of their time to explain difficult matters in the Talmud. So Gaon actually means like a genius. So, I mean, these people have this title, to explain difficult matters in the Talmud, and they would answer them according to their wisdom, and the questioners would assemble the answers and arrange them into books to learn from them. So Geonim, or Gaon, means genius. So they had some books, and that's people would write letters to them, and they would respond with various decisions or their best answers, and those are called the teshuvot. So let's see here. The Geonim in each generation also composed works to clarify the Talmud. Some explained individual halachot. Some explained individual chapters which posed difficulties in his times, and some explained entire tractates and orders. So they also composed, so the orders of the Mishnah, there's 6 orders of the Mishnah, and then they're divided into tractates. So that's the way that works. They also composed definitive halachot regarding the forbidden and the permitted, the liable and the exempt, in matters relevant to the times, so that one who could not delve into the depths of the Talmud could still attempt to reach the correct knowledge. This was Hashem's work, in which all of the wise men of the Jewish people were involved from the day the Talmud was composed until this day, which is the 8th year following 1 century and 1 millennium from the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, the Holy Temple. That is the 4,937th year since the creation of the world. So he's given you the date that he wrote this. In this time, there are constant extreme troubles, and the hour is pressing for all, and the wisdom of our sages is lost, and the understanding of our savants has become hidden. Therefore, those explanations, halachot and responsa, composed by the Geonim, who saw to it that they were clear, have become difficult in our times, and only a small amount of men understand their subjects appropriately. It goes without saying that the Talmud itself, the Talmud Bavli, the Talmud Yerushalmi, Sifrei, and the Toseftot require a breadth of knowledge and a wise spirit and much time, and only afterwards can one discover the correct path in matters of the forbidden and the permitted, and how the other laws of the Talmud are understood. So he's just talking about the legal matters. There are other things in Judaism, like the whole side of like the spiritual and the prophetic tradition of Judaism that deals with the spiritual side, which is a whole nother interesting ball game. It kind of got mixed into, I think, what people don't like today, or some people don't like the idea of, talking about Kabbalah, which is the spiritual tradition, and it appears to me to be the tradition of the prophets of old, and it deals with a lot of stuff in terms of like, because you can have a legal framework of how to run a country, how to run a culture, but there's also that spiritual element to it, which is just as important. So, just on the legal side here. So they require breadth of knowledge and a wise spirit and much time, and only afterwards can one discover the correct path in matters of the forbidden and the permitted, and how the other laws of the Torah are understood. So, I therefore, he says, figuratively shook out the edge of my robe. I, Moshe ben Maimon of Spain. So he's actually saying, I, Moshe ben Maimon Hasfaradi. I relied upon the Creator, blessed be He, and I delved deeply into these books, and I saw fit to compose a work of those things which become clear from all these works regarding the forbidden and the permitted, the impure and the pure, and other laws of the Torah, all in clear language and concisely, so that the oral Torah be arranged clearly in everyone's mouth, without questions and without refutations, without one party saying thus and another saying otherwise, but rather clear, close, correct conclusions according to the law, which becomes clear from all these works and explanations, dating from the time of Rabbeinu HaKadosh until now. So from the guy who wrote the Mishnah until now. So that all the statutes are obvious to both small and great in the laws of every mitzvah and in the law of all things ordained by the sages and the prophets. The guiding purpose that one not require any other composition in the world for any law of the laws of Israel, but rather that this work include the entire oral Torah with the ordinances, customs, and decrees enacted since the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until the completion of the Talmud, as explained to us by the Geonim and all their works composed following the Talmud. I have therefore named this work Mishneh Torah, subsequent to the Torah. For a person can first read the written Torah and then read this work and know from it the entire oral Torah, without having to read any other work between them. So that is a very big feat that he set out for himself. I think he did a very good job of that, as we will find in subsequent readings. I saw fit to divide this work into separate halachot for each subject, and I shall divide the halachot into chapters in the same subject, and I shall divide each chapter into smaller halachot so that they be easily accessible for oral study. And just for somebody out there, so halachot are, so think about how you walk out your day. How do you walk something out? So halacha means to walk, halach, right? So those halachot on each subject, some are halachot which include the laws of only a single mitzvah. So when he says that, he means if you enumerate the 613 mitzvot from the Torah, you have positive and negative ones, mitzvot that you do and things you don't do. He's saying some are halachot, which include laws of only a single mitzvah, it being a mitzvah which includes many matters of tradition and being a subject unto itself. And some are halachot that include the laws of many mitzvot. So if those mitzvot all relate to the same subject, for the division of this work is by subject, and not by the numbering of the mitzvot, as will become clear to the reader. The number of mitzvot in the Torah, which are applicable throughout the generations, is 613 mitzvot. Of them, 248 mitzvot are positive, symbolized by the number of man's organs, and of them 365 negative mitzvot, symbolized by the number of days in the solar year. So I want to point out here, though, that I believe he divides this work is divided into 83 sections across his 14 books, and I believe as a doctor, he saw that there were 83 diseases that can affect the human body, and each of those mitzvot have an effect on one of those, can affect those diseased systems in your body. So as a doctor, he doesn't make this connection entirely in this book, but keep that in mind. He's a doctor. He actually structured his book in that way. There is an idea that certain mitzvot are connected to your ailments, your diseases in your life. They say that King Solomon, Shlomo, he knew what all those were, and he knew the cures for them. And today we have all that lost, and it was destroyed. That book was destroyed that he wrote because they felt that it was a distraction of idolatry. So just keep that in mind. So now I'm going to end right here, but next he covers the positive mitzvot, and then there's another section for the negative mitzvot. So there's a lot of them. I think I'll probably end up dividing into a couple sections for each video. But the one thing to remember here is, okay, so whenever the publishers got a hold of this, they actually hacked up his work, and they took the Sefer HaMitzvot, and they made that a separate book that they sold because they can sell more books by doing that. So he's going to basically give summaries of all these mitzvot. And again, so in the Jewish mind, there was a handful of different authors, rabbis, that wrote books on how to enumerate those 613 mitzvot. So how to count them, but there are different counts, but he's giving you his count. And again, he comes from a very solid lineage of very intelligent men and judges. So I would put a lot of stress on this, that even though there's the number thing, but for his structure of his book, it's not something to get bent out of shape that one person over here enumerates the mitzvot differently than the RAMBAM. So thanks for watching.